I cradled Miles in my arms as he coughed up a putrid mixture of snot, blood, and vomit. He was about to check out, and I had to know who did it. Miles Monroe had been my partner in our private dick business for 10 years and wasn't easy to kill. Despite the 3.45 caliber holes in his chest, he rasped into my pocket recorder. It was the Donald who done it. Sure. I've seen plenty poor schmucks by the farm, but Miles was different, see? He'd saved my ass a couple of times, and I owed him. We just begun investigating a hostile takeover scheme today and had become separated in a dark, seedy warehouse. As soon as I'd heard the gunshots, I knew they weren't from my partner's Beretta. Miles choked out a death rattle and gave up the ghost. At that moment, I swore I'd find his killer, or either send him up the river or put him under it. Miles once told me I was the smartest PI in the business, and now I would prove it to him. It was 4 a.m., and I still had our client's $200 retainer in my pocket when I started my journey across this strange city. I planned to work my way toward the ocean front, where I knew my wealthy perp lived. From the warehouse, I passed Mediterranean and Baltic, home to the low end of the social ladder, then trudged through the coal dust of the Reading railroad yards. A couple of street thugs approached me, flicking a switchblade. They ran off when I flashed to my two friends, Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson. I was now in the middle of Chinatown, crossing its main drag, Oriental Avenue. A slim, slant-eyed hooker wearing a miniskirt that looked painted on approached me. She asked me if I wanted to party with her, $200 for an all-nighter. I slapped her silly and left her sobbing on the sweaty sidewalk. I don't pay for my pleasure, sweetheart, I spat at her. But as I walked away, I was thinking about that miniskirt and what lay beneath. That was really some hard body she had. The city jail was between Connecticut and St. James Place, so I stopped in to see my old friend, Sergeant Soon Lee O'Cohen. He had a screwed-up family. But he almost overcome it and became a good cop. Soon Lee was looking more plump than I remembered, but I tactfully ignored this. I told him about Miles' death and not about naming his killer. This was personal. Soon Lee said he'd send the meat wagon to the warehouse and told me not to do anything crazy. Sure. I was too smart to take his advice seriously. It was about 9 a.m. and I was standing in front of the electric company's offices. I knew they could give me the Donald's exact address from their computer files. I was sure that a quick flash of my private investigator badge would melt away any obstacles. No dice. The gum-chewing receptionist looked down her nose at me like she was La Jolla and I was Fresno. You can use the payphone in the hall to call the record room, she snarled. Bitch. I called the main number, pressed 1 for English, and spent the next half hour being routed into a labyrinth of departments, voice commands, and several classical selections I'd never heard the way before. I finally snapped, leaving my frustrations in the phone booth in the form of a forcibly detached receiver on the floor and a urine sample in the coin return slot. Passing through Pennsylvania Station, I found myself in a corner parking lot. On one end was a sidewalk shyster, running the classic 3-card Monte game. He had a New York accent and asked me if I wanted to take a chance. All criminals are alike to me. I hate their guts. Mr. 3-card Monte was gushing blood from a broken nose after I worked him over. I took his tuna fish sandwich for lunch and walked toward the sounds of bluegrass. I knew the Donald's place was on the ocean, but after another right turn onto Kentucky Avenue, I had a feeling I was walking in a squared circle. When I passed the B&O tracks, I decided to try a different tact and turn left. I was facing an old mansion and figured someone in there could give me directions to the shore. Fat chance. It was a freaking nightmare. The door opened and there in the hall was an old gentleman wearing a mustard-colored blazer. Without warning, he slugged me across the forehead with a silver candlestick and fled up the stairs. I staggered into the kitchen and collapsed. I tried to get up, but an old biddy dressed in peacock feathers had looped a rope around my neck and was strangling me. What the... I smashed a fist into her rouged face and crawled into the library. From behind the library door, a man dressed in a green suit and hat jumped on me, got me in a chokehold, and was about to skewer me with an 8-inch knife. I pulled him to the floor, rolled him over, and used his own weapon to shish kebab into his Adam's apple. I left him, gurgling his life away, and ran out the front door. What I'd stumbled into, I hadn't a clue. I decided to stay on the straight and narrow from now on. After crossing Atlantic and Ventnor Avenues, I saw the water company building. After weighing the information versus frustration possibilities there, I walked on, and suddenly came upon a lovely garden. There were flowers, shrubs, and vegetables in neatly planted rows. I was getting a bit hungry, so I stooped down and pulled up a luscious carrot. Every PI needs his vitamin A, I figured. Well, I was on my second bite when a crazed old man ran toward me, eyes bulging and waving a shotgun. "Out of that schmutz, you verstinken Gunnef!" he shouted. "I'm calling the cops." I was afraid I was going to be accidentally ventilated by the trembling 12 gauge at any second, so when his screams brought a policeman onto the scene, I was relieved. Unfortunately, the cop was the brother-in-law of old Marvin here, whose garden I'd violated. He took me directly to jail, directly across town, where I was told Sergeant O'Cohen had just left on maternity leave. I guess old Soon Lee was more screwed up than I thought. I cooled my heels for an hour or so, then decided to cough up my $200 to get out of jail on bond. What a bummer. It was Tap City for me. I spent the greater half of the day maneuvering back to my place of arrest, but now making only right turns and definitely avoiding Marvin's garden. As I crossed Pacific, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania avenues, in turn, I was impressed by the beauty and affluence of the area. Large homes with manicured lawns and 4-car garages. I was getting so close to the Donald, I could smell his money. The neighborhood's old short-line railroad had been converted into a series of well-appointed flatbed rail cars that daily carried a multitude of Hummers and their rich inhabitants to work and back. The end point of luxury and gas economy had arrived. Wide, lushly tree-lined Park Place was my final cross street, and there, bordering the ocean, was the boardwalk. It didn't take my superior brain very long to figure out where the Donald lived. Nestled on the boardwalk, rising 20 stories into the polluted New Jersey sky, the blazing neon announced, "Trump Taj Mahal." All my intelligence, experience, guile, and guts served me well, as I was able to serendipitously make my way to the penthouse suite. I chuckled at the gilded sign on the door. "The Donald is in." I negotiated the locked high-tech door using my low-tech Magic Kingdom card. The famously coiffed hair of the Donald looked up from his mahogany desk and asked, "May I help you?" I stared him straight in the eyes. I knew his power was no match for my brain. I played the pocket recorder's accusation and watched him squirm. His dream of having a monopoly of the 3 saltwater taffy shops on Boardwalk had ended with murder 1. I had the bastard, and he was going down. Miles' death would not be for naught. The Donald was sweating the sweat of fear when he mumbled, "If you give me the tape, you can name your price." This was an unexpected turn, and I savored it. What should it be? Mucho dinero for me or the death row for him? I thought about my dead partner, Miles. Then I thought about the urban journey that had brought me to this point, and clearly recalled the people I'd encountered along the way. It took some soul-searching and mental computation, but finally I looked directly into his pink, puffy face and gave him my answer. 200, and the tape is yours. The Donald peeled off 2 crisp C-notes from his wallet as I handed over the recorder. I left the penthouse with 200 schmackaroos, burning a hole in my pocket, and headed back to Oriental Avenue. In the game of life, we all have our price.